You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. We hope you enjoy this week's show, and you can find out more about us by going online at beardedtheologians.com, where you can pick up a few t-shirts, listen to a few old episodes, and find ways that you can connect with us. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
So this week on the show, we're going to talk about humility. So Zach, when you think about that, what comes up for you?
That was quite the lead-in. Humility is one of those things that always makes me laugh. And when I think about it, I always think about back when I was a youth pastor and I was driving a van full of kids home after a late night youth event. And there's always that one kid in every youth group. And if you've ever done youth ministry, you know who that kid is. And if you've ever been in multiple youth ministries, you have multiple kids and they're all the same. It's all the same kid. But we were driving home from this youth event and talking about, just life and things that kids talk about in 15 passenger vans at midnight. And this one kid, he was probably a freshman, talking about, playing football and how and that. And somebody in the car went, "Man, you're really humble, aren't you?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm the best at being humble." And was not joking. He did not catch the sarcasm in that person's voice, and really just kind of brought it home. And it all when I think about humility, when I preach about it, when I talk about it, I always think about that story. And we all have those moments where we're like, you know what? I'm all right. I'm doing pretty good at this, which not bad at all. But it's in those moments when somebody's like, when we need to show a little bit of humility and say, you know what, I have a team behind me, or you know what, it takes a lot of work to get this done, and I really appreciate your kindness and things. I always think of that story of, man, I'm really good at being humble, and just totally missing it. And so, yeah, humility is a big thing, especially for us as clergy, right? Like, we do a lot of things, and folks are really nice and caring, and often like to let us know they appreciate that. And the ways in which we receive that is sometimes hard. I don't love compliments. They're hard for me to. I appreciate them, but they're hard for me to hear and not be awkward about. And all trying to keep that idea of being humble intact. And yeah, so I kind of start there with the idea of humility and being humble, knowing that there's really a big nuance to it, right? That I'm sure we'll get into. Matt, when you think about the idea of humility and being humble, what do you think of?
I think that about that struggle, the as clergy and even as followers of Christ, that call to be humble is like, I don't want to say thankless. Like we should be thankful. Like we should not be seeking thanks. And I struggle with that when people say, "Well, you should make that announcement of saying thank you to someone." And I'm like, well, if they're giving service and they don't want to be acknowledged, like what's like if they, you and I both have been around a lot of people who are very humble people who don't want to be known of what they're doing. And then we've been around people who that's all that they want. They do the thing for a little thing. So like, I think when we talk about it in our faith, being humble is that act of practice that leads us to not do the things for recognition, but the dependence on God to lead us through, and that this is really God working on us and through us. Like to me, that's what it is. Like to be humble is to recognize that God is working on you and working through you, and that's that continuous cycle that happens in our daily lives. And it's something that we should strive for. We should be recognizing both. Whereas this, some of Christianity that's being presented is more about the God working on you and what you are. It's not what it means to be humble or to be really true, to live in true humility, is to live in that cycle of God working on you and working through you, and everything you do is that. We shouldn't necessarily just seeking thanks and praise, like your story, but recognizing when it's okay to say thank you. There is time to say thank you, and there's time to say, like, I know you probably struggle with it similarly, like these. Like, what do you say when they say thank you? And you're like, I don't know if this is the place that you say thank you. Like, at the end of the funeral, like, you did a good job. I'm like, yeah, I did my job. Like, thank you. Like, I don't need that. It's like, it's definitely it's a struggle because we want that praise, but we also know we don't want it. So yeah, I hope that tracks.
Yeah. And I think that's just us as people, right? Like, we're obviously talking about it from the clergy perspective of we're up in front of folks, right? Like our job is a very public job and it's a very social job, and we preach and teach and do things that people want to appreciate and say thank you for. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to be like, well, yeah, I was doing my job, right? Like, um, yeah, you're right. I struggle with that too. And whether it's a funeral or a church service or whatever, anything that I have to get up and speak for or that I just do on the day-to-day basis and somebody says thank you for it's hard. Like I don't know what to do with that compliment other than just say thanks. Um, and you're welcome. We'll just keep doing it, right? Like that's what we're here to do. Um, and yeah, I mean, I struggle with that just in the sense of you don't have to tell me thank you, but also sometimes people just need that, right? That's the way they're remaining humble and knowing that they've got work to do and appreciate the folks that are helping guide them, especially in this in our spirituality and faith and whatnot. Folks need to say thank you, right? Like that's how they're connecting and trying to remain humble in their faith journeys and knowing that there's room for them to grow. And I think we're bad as pastors at that because it's just weird and hard and awkward. And we've seen the other end of it where we have folks that do the same job we do that aren't humble about it and walk around like they're God's gift to humanity and that the people they're talking to or leading owe them something. And so it makes it practice that true humility um, in those ways.
Like, we're gonna name names.
Paul, for example, is one of the people I think about when we think about humility as far as scripture is concerned. And I know I harp on Paul a lot in this podcast, but you know, he starts all of his letters, if not most of them, of "I am Paul, God's servant," which seems like a humble brag, but if we read it in the day and context in which Paul had to identify himself. He had to say and take the authority of who he was and what he had, so that the folks he was writing letters to know it's him, right? Know that he has that authority, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing not humble with that, right? It's when he goes on and gives us a litany of why he's so great that really kind of grinds my gears. But that's Paul, right? That's the things he does.
He's writing his you need to get to know me letter so you can give me money letter so I can come see you letter. Like, that's what that is.
Right.
It's that you and I both
100%.
have been in campus ministry, know what that letter is. We've had to send out
Hmm.
those letters
Hmm.
saying, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what we've done with our
Hmm.
students, here's what we'd like to do with you, those sort of things. So yeah, I mean, I will admit, when we were reading Second Timothy, I'm kind of glad I stopped where I did, because the next like several lines of the first chapter are Paul's humble brag.
Hmm.
And I think the thing we have to wrestle with as followers of Jesus is, how do we do that, but also like um, how do we like live out that? Like, how do we do it? Like, how do we be humble, but also how do we live things we should, that's the,
Hmm.
to me, that's the struggle that we all have, especially in today's world. That is all about the individual self.
Yeah, and it is, and it's a weird thing, right? Like we I think we inadvertently or very intentionally talk about humility quite a bit. I would imagine there's a pretty decent through line of being humble in our faith and in our spirit and in our actions throughout my sermons, regardless of the topic. And I think it starts with, I hope it starts with me in that vulnerability of just saying, here's where I'm at. Here's what I struggle with. Here are these things. Here's what I love. Here's what I think I'm good at. Right? Just that give and take of being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know if you struggle with this or have a problem with this or know exactly what you're doing and are great. But here's where I'm at. Um, to get to that point of vulnerability to say we're walking this journey together. And I don't think we can be that kind of vulnerable in a way if we're not humble, right? If I lead in such a way, whether it's professionally or personally, that I've got it all together and appear to be perfect or better than, or anything like that, and that vulnerability is not going to come out. No, nobody's going to buy it, right? Um, and I think that has it has an effect on our community, in the ways in which we just as people interact. We're never gonna get to a place that's deeper than that. And that matters not only in our relationships, but in our culture, in our society, that if it's if it's just kind of that performative look at me or see what I did, look at my ribbon or my medal today or whatever this accomplishment is, or looking for those humble brags, we're not ever going to get to know each other. And I that's important. And I think as clergy or just as people, I don't even know that clergy doesn't matter right now. Um, if we're not willing to dig deeper into those relationships with one another and just be vulnerable and humble in that way, to be like, yeah, no, maybe I don't know what that's like, but tell me. I want to hear your story. Not so that we can one up and tell our story, but just so we can listen. That kind of humility and vulnerability, I think, is what changes and shapes our world, or the lack thereof it.
And I think that that's where um, the sense of humility that we hold on to is recognizing that we're not perfect, being
Mhm.
into our mistakes and being honest about our mistakes. And I hope to learn on this, but not in a way that you're always making mistakes. I
Mhm.
think there's a fine line between always saying we're sorry because of the
Mhm.
mistake you made and then just not being good at what you're doing.
Yeah.
There's some people I've been around that's it's one thing to say, oh, I'm sorry I messed up.
Mhm.
If you do that every so often, that's fine. But if you're always messing up, maybe this isn't the place for you to be.
Mhm.
But I think that when we lean into uh, a culture of humility, it goes beyond ourselves. It's receiving the compliments or the criticism and taking it down and thinking, how can I make this better? Having to be at the forefront, whatever, like I think when we wrestle with it, we can see ourselves in what we do with service, whether
Mhm.
it's helping putting up tables or someone like singing someday or preaching or anything else. If we're doing that with a true sense of allowing God to work on us and through us, we can find ourselves in a sense of humility that is contagious, really,
Mhm.
because then people aren't seeking they're more to just be willing to speak. And um, as you think about what it means to cultivate a culture of humility, what kind of comes up for you?
Well, and I think it goes back to taking the compliment, right, or the criticism, either way. It's about hearing what people are saying, good or bad, right? Compliment or criticism, and knowing. Like if it's a compliment and somebody compliments you on a sermon or that you baked a wonderful batch of cookies, right? And you know you're good at those things. Yeah, I know I'm a wonderful baker. I'm not. Other people are. I know I'm a pretty decent preacher. And to hear that compliment of, hey, today's sermon or today's worship service really hit me where I needed it. And not just to say thank you and move on, but to say thank you and hear that and then reflect upon, well, what did I do well today? How do I build on that? How do I keep that going? Or in the event that you make a bad batch of cookies and somebody's like, a little crunchy, or that I just didn't really know what you were getting at in the sermon today. Okay, thank you. I'll take that and get better, right? Like those are, um, I think those are huge ways that we model, professionally, but also just in our own lives to hear what's actually being said, and to take that and build on it and not just say thanks and move on or get grumpy about, no, I did do a good job. That person doesn't know what they're talking about. I think we definitely lose the humility there. But if either way, if we're not able to take it and build on it in good and positive ways and grow ourselves, um, we can show the face of humility all day long, but are we really being humble? And so and you're right. I think that's contagious. If we can model that just as people, it matters.
Yeah. And I think that that's it's interesting we're talking about this during Pastor Appreciation Month, um, because how do we create that culture of pastor appreciation as the
Mhm.
pastor, knowing that like some churches that you and I have both have served churches where we've had to cultivate that sense of appreciation.
Mhm.
And that like that's something I struggle with when I'm entering into a space that that's something that they struggle with.
Mhm.
How do I say I think you'll be able to appreciate me even though like eh, I know my church members are listening right now. You all did an amazing job, so please don't think I'm
Yeah.
coming after you. But like, I think that the struggle we have is that like in this month of pastor appreciation, it's like how do you do that? Like when the church hasn't done it.
Yeah. How do I put this in the newsletter when
Yeah,
everybody knows I write the newsletter, right? Or,
yeah,
yeah. How do I promote this when I'm the one doing announcements? Yeah, it's a weird thing, right? But it's a culture we need to create,
right.
not for us, but for the person that follows us.
Well, and that's what I was going to get at. I remember in my first congregation was working on that, and and I really was honest with them. Like my whole deal with you all, helping you all be more appreciative of the people that serve the church is not for me, but for those that will come after me. I
Mhm.
have to admit, I've been gone now for gosh, almost 16 years, and it's been really fun to see how they have loved on every pastor and person. And I think that um, a lot of what we do as pastors, especially as itinerant pastors, is not for us; it's for the future of what is to come.
Mhm.
And in true humility, the true living we know that we will not see the fruit of what we're doing, but we know the good groundwork and do the right things, and then the fruit will come. And when we see that, we can smile from a distance or the next appointment or three appointments away. We think that that's knowing was a great way of just understanding, like, hey, not yet. There is power in the not yet. And
Mhm.
that's, to me, the compliments and things like that. There's something you feel good and there's it's learning how to receive them, but being driven by them, and just continue doing the work that you're called to do and the work that you should be doing. And we did that prayer again because so they're learning. And to me, that's how you have a good sense of humanity.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think it's the recognition of both there, right? Like how do yeah. I don't know that you can do it individually, right? Like you've got to have the both hand of being able to recognize where you are, what you're doing and what you're not doing, right? And hear both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that that's a good place for us to learn today. So Zach, since last time we were on Zoom, where have you seen God at work in your life?
Um, we geez. So Sunday was this last week was World Communion Sunday. Um, if you participated or not, it's great. But it's one of those days that almost, well, not almost, always sneaks up on me every year. Just because it's not on my calendar, and usually what happens is I'm looking for something else and it pops up and I'm like, oh, it's this week. Woo, great. But it's one of the only Sundays throughout the year that I intentionally do the full liturgy for communion. And somewhere along the line, 6 months ago, Passac planned this sermon series called Jesus for Everyone, and it just happened to work out. I um, planned well enough that I had a whole sermon about communion on Communion Sunday. Not well, yeah, communion. Just it's called a seat at the table, and I was working through uh, what it actually is to celebrate communion and what Jesus is getting at in these gifts of bread and wine. And it took me down a fun deep dive of Jewish history and practice through the Passover, and then practice of communion as Christians. And I if you've ever celebrated communion with me in the church, I say it all the time. I love it. It's the thing that's kept me in the church. It's why I'm a pastor, truly. And I just hold a great reverence to it, as all clergy do. But um, occasionally, occasionally I get caught up in caught up in the moment, caught up in the uh, specialness that I hold for it. And at the end of my sermon last week, it wasn't even in the communion liturgy. It was just the end of my sermon, talking about everyone having a seat at the table, talking about the relationship that Jesus and Judas have, one throughout life, but throughout those moments at the table for the very first time, as Jesus does this thing. Um, Judas isn't ever excused from the table. Judas gets a seat there. And that was the invitation, was to recognize the people we've excused from the table and to remember that we all have a seat at the table, and that if Judas has a seat at the table, by God, so do we, and so does everyone. And I got choked out. I usually bury those emotions pretty deep down. I can get through the things, but it it was truly, truly a movement of the Holy Spirit, and that reminder and that humility to be like, this church, this isn't even for you. This is for me. I need to hear this too, and probably need to hear it first. Uh, and I just love getting to make that invitation. But yeah, there was a minute there that some unintended vulnerability snuck through, and the only way that I can explain it, that it was just one of those spirit moments, and lean into it and just appreciate it as a person. So, um, yeah, I that's where I was at this week. It was
So you
still
cried.
running pretty high on it. It was good.
So you cried. Is what
I
you're
did cry. And there's a timestamp in my family group chat from my
saying.
wife that said Dad cried 10/17 Sunday. Because that's our running joke when we watch movies is when am I gonna cry during a movie?
We need
Um,
to get the Jordan-esque crying Zach
yeah,
face.
yeah. If you go through my live stream, you could probably find it. Yeah. What about you, Matt? Where you seeing God at work this week?
Um, yeah, I am so what I've loved about the last few weeks is how we've tried a new thing and people are stepping up in ways that they weren't before or haven't. And there's been an amazing high at the church on Sunday mornings and worship. It's just been so great to see. And even in our really created community church, the conversations that the deep value, we're just reading the particularly well, right after church. It's been really fun to have this conversation, and it's just been such a great experience. It's been a long time coming. It's just been a lot of fun. I'm blessed to get the experience that we made. It's calls and me to have some humility, but also like motivating me to go even further and deeper. That's all kind of exciting. Listeners, thank you for listening. You can go to our website at Beardcast and pick up some items for Pastor Appreciation Month for special pastors in your life, and even feel free to send them something. So grateful for you. So for the meetings, thanks. No, you're not. Zach Bechtold, thanks for joining us.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Subscribe and like this video and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.